Morning, everybody. It is a beautiful day outside. The sun is sort of shining, clouds are screwing everything over, and etc. etc. Ignoring all that, I'm stuck inside here working on development things because, yeah, that's what I do. So, anyways, we're back with more coding stuff, and I felt like doing a little joke there at the beginning, but we're going to be getting back into the whole coding thing. Now, when we left off, we got some button logic working, some movement logic, entity selection, and various other things. Um, Shortly after that, I went ahead and I put a. Actually, I don't know if I did this in the last video or I did this after the last video, but we got a text that says we can put where the entity, what entity we have selected, or what we have this. I put backgrounds behind it is actually what I did since last video. I'm getting a little confused of what's happened since. It does make actually reading things a little better. It may look like it's not centered properly. This is actually not the background that isn't centered correctly. It is actually the text itself. We will actually be fixing that here shortly. And we will also be working on icons if time allows. So this recording will hopefully be an hour or under an hour. So yeah, we have everything. Unfortunately, all the AIs are 10. We're going to fix this first because this is a little annoying. So hit close all because we want to go open up the game loop because the game loop is where all the logic for the entities is actually stored. Right now, we just when we call a init, we're just making a map. So we want to call this enemy. Enemy 1. And we actually, since we're here, we're going to set the controller for these guys real quick. So AI equals new AI. And we'll have to figure out where we need to import this from. There we go. So we're going to set the position, or right before we set position, we're going to set controller, and we're just going to call it AI. This way we can actually confirm who the AI is, and we actually need to make a name for the AI. Public, actually we're going to go here, and we're going to do this. Public string, we're going to make an ID value. So we're going to make a constructor here, so public controller string ID. The reason we're doing this is so we can track precisely who has control of what. We could use UIDs for this, but since we're going to have so few players actually controlling things and so few AIs, we can just uniquely name all the AIs and it'll do pretty good. We could have just done an int incrementer or even a byte incrementer because there's going to be less than 255 unique objects controlling stuff. But we're just going to use a string because it's really easy to work with. We can set it to final. We can also do public final string display name. We can set this as well while we're at it. String display name. So that way we have something we can put up on the screen to say who's currently in control. We'll put this somewhere in the top middle. This will go underneath the turn timer and stuff when we actually implement it. The turn timer will not be implemented at the moment because I don't feel like making scroll bars or anything, although a scroll bar in reality will be pretty easy to make. I do need to rewrite my render engine before we ever get to that point because I want to be able to do transitioning UVs and stuff, but I need something more similar to how Minecraft does its 2D stuff, and right now I'm using like 3-dimensional meshes and I want to get away from meshes for all the 2D components. I actually want to kind of almost do away with my entire shader system and stuff, but I got to do more research into that. But we were going to do this. This means I have to update my AI object. And this is going to be AI and then plus. So the reason why we're going to prefix this, we'll do the same thing for the player. So if we actually hit build, it'll actually error out and tell us that we need to edit the player class. Or actually, we need to actually name our thing. So this will be AI1. Quite literally, we just apply someone. We'll call this enemy AI. And we'll hit build again, and it'll error out on the player object here. Here we go. So we need to do this, and we'll prefix this with player. Almost all of the game objects that use unique IDs do prefix like this. And we're going to hit make project again, and we'll have to redo it here somewhere. So here's where we make the player. We're just going to call this player 1 as well, and we're just going to call this player, or player 1. That'll work. Potentially, we're going to end up with roughly 4 players in a game master is what we're going to end up with. That's a standard setup when you play Dungeons and Dragons. You usually have about 4 people playing, and then you have one guy doing the dungeon master thing. I've seen larger groups, I've seen smaller groups. I'm not going to limit it any, so we'll go ahead and we'll set it up so, actually we will put a limit on it of say 40 people. There's probably actually a limit on what Netty can handle, so we'll have to go look at what Netty can do. I think Netty can actually do almost infinite connections, but um, we'll have to put some kind of limitation in here because the logic doesn't want to support infinite. Although if we can figure out a way to support infinite, we'll go ahead and code it in because I don't really care how many factions we have or how many players we have. But we get that set up. And I want to go ahead and code civilians in real quick. So we're going to put civilians in. The civilians are going to be, we're going to only want to spawn about 5 of these guys. We're going to reuse the AI object. We're going to call this AI2, and we're going to call this neutral AI. So we're going to spawn 5 of these guys, and we want these guys to spawn like between 50 and negative 50. That should work. And we need to actually call this enemy plus I. And we're going to call this neutral plus I. Right now this is all just going to be randomly generated is how we're going to do all the levels. The first game release I'm going to get out is going to be just a random level generator. And you'll just have to kill enemies per room, and there'll be some civilians, because what the levels will be is will be parts of cities, because you'll be like in a hive style city. Like if you've ever looked at 40K, that's kind of what we're looking at is the hive cities from 40K, because the game we're building in, the planet's been devastated repeatedly. They've had multiple wars with each other, they've fucked their environment up, they've nuked each other, they've done all kinds of stuff. Even though at the current time in the story, there's only one faction controls the entire planet. Before that, there were tons of factions, and one faction eventually dominated and took everybody over. So we're in the era where that one faction exists, but that one faction is not exactly nice. They're called the Mannheim. They're basically a bunch of dicks. They're cybernetically obsessed people, but they're elitist at the same time. So they believe in almost like a superior race mentality, kind of like the Nazis, but not as extreme as the Nazis. So they're not like genocidal, but at the same time, they don't exactly care for anybody else. They want to support their own people. They want to support their own interests. They're incredibly selfish. So even when working with each other, they don't like to work together well. They're always trying to hit a perfection point, so they're always trying to upgrade themselves, try to get better. They are highly industrialized, so they build huge factories, huge power plants, and in the process, they destroy the environment. And this will actually lead into the end point of the story where all this will come back to bite them in the ass, which is the whole point. Because after all, the planet is called Icarus, and it's called Icarus for the same reason the story called Icarus is. So in Icarus, you have a guy who wanted to fly up and towards the sun. Gets too close to the sun, his wings melt, and he falls. This is the same ideal. These people are trying to hit perfection, and they get so close that in the process, they destroy themselves. But we'll get into that because one of the campaigns for the game will cover that whole storyline. It'll go into a story that my buddy Grogger is actually writing. So he's writing a book for this. It'll be actually probably a short novel, about 100 pages when he's probably done. We'll release that eventually when he feels comfortable, but there will be a campaign that'll mirror his story almost precisely. We were planning on doing a 3D tank game that did the story, and we might still come back and do it. We might hit several different perspectives from the same story. As the RPG game is going to be one of our first games, it will not be our last game. We have some 20 games planned. Right now, the current thought process is to finish this game. We're going to build a 2D combat tank game, which is not going to be related to this storyline at all. Then we're going to build a Diablo 2 style click action fighting game. So it'll be like Diablo 2, Diablo 3, that type of game where you run around. You've got health bar, magic spells, you can fight. My brother really wants to build a game like that, so I'm like, I'm entertaining him. If he's going to help me with my company, I'll build him a game. Plus, he has been talking about how to do it, and I've been talking to him what I can do. He wants to do like a loot box based system and a few other things. We know we're going to do multiplayer. It is going to be PvP based. There won't be any PvP in the game. It is going to be mainly aimed at cell phone market because cell phone market doesn't have a good stable Diablo 2 style game. I know there's a couple people have tried, but none of them have hit top, and we don't really plan to hit top either. We just want to make a game. But we're going to move on because this is about coding and not about what I'm doing business-wise. So we've got our neutrals, which will be player 2. We've got our enemies. We need some faction system. Some kind of team system, maybe. or friend or foe system. We also need to keep track of what the textures and stuff for all our entities are. That's something we haven't done yet. Actually, something I did off screen is all the textures are cached now. So we've been we've been doing. If I actually go find this, we've been calling create texture, and every time we call this, we just generate a new texture. Now we call get. Get checks that the texture exists. The texture exists. It just passes it back. Because textures are static objects. They have a width, a height, and a texture ID. The texture ID is actually on the graphics card. That's the reason why it's an int value. We go, hey graphics card, I want to load a new texture. The graphics card goes, hey, I'll pass you back an ID. And we just do that. There's nothing else to do. So this all looks good. All looks good. I have to still do this through the texture sheet system. There's a texture sheet. Right now, the font's the only thing to use texture sheet. I do want to transition as much over as possible to the texture sheet, but what we're going to do is the same thing Minecraft does. You load in individual icons, and then we stitch everything together. I'm going to have to toy with that because I'm not sure how Minecrafts work, and I sat yesterday just thinking over how are we going to load textures which are the same size, because the guns are not going to be 1x1s texture-wise. The only guns that are going to be like that are like small SMGs and handguns. All the rifles, the big SMGs, the assault rifles are going to be 2 wides. Rocket launchers 3 wide. Railgun might be a 2x3. So you're going to get pretty sizable weapons. But we'll get into that here later, because that's something I'm probably going to try to work on today, because I want to get textures to start loading for the weapons and items. But it's not something we're going to focus too much on. First thing is we got our neutrals here. We want to create a new texture here. So I'm going to open up my texture folder. I'm going to really quickly just recolor one just so we have something. So tabletop, resources, textures. We're going to make a character folder real quick. Actually, we'll call it entity. These eventually need to be transitioned to layer files, which are grayscaled, and then we'll implement color. But right now, we're just going to manually create everything because I don't have any systems in place to render complex entities at the moment, and my text artist hasn't been doing much for me lately. Actually, rephrase it. He has been doing stuff, but he hasn't been doing like a huge amount. I actually need him to get on board and be making tons of textures for me. But unfortunately, he does have a job. He does have school to work, or actually, I think he's done with school. But he does have like stuff to deal with, and I'm making sure that I'm not taking too much time out of his day. I don't recognize that number. Charlotte, NC, at North Carolina. Oh, wow. We want to colorize this real quick. You know what? That'll work right perfectly. The default color is just exactly what I want. Some kind of bluish color. So we'll hit File, and we're going to hit Save. You know what? We will save our XV file. File, Export As, and then we'll export as char3. And I'll get my artist to work on this more. This is roughly what we're going to do with the characters. We've got our helmet here. We've got then our body underneath that, a backpack. We've got arms. The arms will actually end up being separate files altogether because we're going to want them to move to match the weapons. So we're going to have handhold positions, a variety of other things. I got to work on that a lot because I don't want to be using static character models to render all the weapons. I want to kind of animate things. But we'll get to that here later. So we're going to discard changes we have because we don't need a resave. We got char3. And then all we got to do is make a new character. Because right now how the mesh system's set up, I don't think we can transition the texture in runtime. Actually, I think we can. Yeah, we actually could change the texture out. The only problem with this is, though, is if we end up using a texture... Oh, okay, so that was a job offer. As much as I want a job, I've actually just finally went like, screw it, I'm just going to make games for the rest of my life. At least that's my hope. But as I was saying, the mesh has a texture UV in it. As long as our texture object maintains the same UV pattern as our mesh, we can recycle our mesh. But if we go to a texture sheet, we can't do that because then our UVs will change. This is the reason why I want to redo my game engine, because we're not really using the shaders. We're barely even touching the graphics card at this point. So I need to figure out some way that I could just go shader dot render if I want to do that. If I can't do that, I'm just going to go to like base OpenGL calls where we just go set vertice, set vertice, set vertice, render. Minecraft does it literally that way. Minecraft I don't think has a single shader in it. I have to double check to make sure, but I've never seen one. They might actually have something though, especially in the newer versions. Actually, the newer versions they may have redid the whole thing because I'm stuck in 1.7 still, and they're up to 1.12. But I need to redo the meshes because if we go to the mesh real quick, we store vertices, indices, and texture coordinates, but these get turned into these. So we get turned into an ID on the graphics card of where this stuff is. Because we're doing an ID, we have essentially, I think, bounded our texture coordinates to the model. Because right here is how we generate it right here. And when we go to bind, I don't see anywhere where we're binding the textures. We just bind the vertex buffer, and then we bind the indice buffer. And that's all we do. We don't bind textures at all, which is worrisome because that means I can't change textures on the meshes. I actually do want to start catching the meshes, particularly because when you zoom in and out, the zoom levels don't change any. So we have zoom 1, zoom 2, and zoom 3. And we'll probably always still have zoom 1, 2, and 3. And if I make it any other zoom level, we'll just have zoom 1 through 6, or we'll have zoom 1 through 12. That means I can cache the mesh objects to make sure that we're not regenerating meshes all the time. Although, depending on how it works out, I may just regenerate them anyways, because how often is somebody going to be zooming in and out unless they're a Korean player who likes to use hotkeys to move around the screen. Have you ever seen like a StarCraft player play from Korea? I watched one recently here a couple weeks ago, and it blew my mind. I always knew these guys were quick and stuff, but I watched the guy use hotkeys to transition around the whole entire map. Didn't touch his mouse once. It just like, how do you even mentally do that? But we need to go and make a new render object. Eventually we'll just make a system like we have for tiles. Like if I open up, where are my tiles actually? Tiles, 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 tiles. There's a tile object there. We have misplaced an important class. I close this, close this. Oh, it is something in the tile. Okay, so how we do tiles is we call load and we make a new render rec per tile. This is the real reason I want to recycle things because this information doesn't change any. I do want to maybe do a mesh generator for the map. I've actually been considering making one large texture for the map and then rendering a supersized UV that is the map. But I've been trying to decide how the graphics card will even handle that properly. So we're going to have to think it over and we'll work on it. And I'll make some optimizations here later. I'm not going to work on it too much. But we're going to do something similar like this for the characters. Something similar, definitely for the items, are going to have something similar to this. But we're going to go back to the game display, because that's where we're registering all of our stuff for the game display. We're registering all of our stuff, right? Or renders are being registered in the game display. So we now need a character 3. This is really just going to be a copy and paste. And we're just going to go to wherever we're initializing this stuff, and we're just going to make another one. I'm really hoping to get all of my stuff set up here so we can just start generating characters properly, where we go, hey, he has a Kevlar helmet, that's the color blue, and stuff like that. I'll probably do RGB colors because that'll be the easiest way to do it, because this does support colorizing things. I just have to code the shader to support it. We're going to go all the way down to our render code. And this is where we're rendering things. We're going to go if entity dot, actually we're going to go else here, and we're just going to render everything else as entity 3. So we'll have a default render. We'll go if entity dot controller. Actually, we want to do this real quick. So I'm going to go if this is what this is, and then we want to go else. Yeah, we'll just go else here because we don't need anything else for this. So we just want to copy this up here, put this here, and then reformat so the code lines up. And if we load our game real quick, we should see this in action. We're probably gonna have to move around to find those other 5 entities because there's only 5 civilians. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. We just crashed our graphics. I need to update the location of all the characters because we moved the file. So we moved it to entity. So right here, we just need a prefix with entity on all these. It's interesting though is that the graphics will crash on loading the texture, but then everything else will continue to work. I did something right when I made these. But so yeah, we got these. So if we zoom out real quick, we just got to go look for where our other entities are. Actually, you know what? We need to do something else here. You know, we're going to make another entity event altogether. I'm going to paste this, and we're just going to open with GIMP again. We're not going to recolor. Well, actually, yeah, we'll colorize this real quick. We're going to color like a brown color or something to represent any other object, but we're going to chop the arms off real quick for this, and we're going to chop the backpack off. The reason we're doing this is because this is going to represent it's an entity, but we don't know what it is entity. And I messed up on that corner. Yeah, I'm using the selection delete here because you have to configure the eraser to properly delete. But colorize, brown, high saturation, that'll work. We'll hit File, Save As, and we'll call this char4. I know I said I was going to work on font in this, but we seem to be preoccupied with doing entities, and we'll do entities and then we'll do font. And we want to delete this guy. We got our char4, and we want to just go really quickly like this. Copy this. Oh, I deleted the line by mistake. There we go. So char4, and then we're going to go ahead and make char4 render. And I'll probably off screen write the whole render class because even though it's something you guys may want to see, it's really simple. It's just going to be a hash map of name of entity to his render object. Or it's going to be equipment name to texture, and then there'll be a layer system. So there'll be like helmet, head, goggles. There'll be like a whole bunch of objects we'll have, and then each will have its own rotation value. So there'll be head rotation, body rotation, arm rotations. A lot of things. I gotta basically make a ragdoll in 2-dimensional. But we got render 4, so we're gonna go back down to our render code. We're gonna set this to render 4. We're then gonna copy this. We're gonna go else if entity.controller ID equals, or actually no, we don't want to do it this way. You got to do, if you ever do a string comparison, you have to do it this way. If you do equal equal, it's going to check if they exactly match each other, and that's not the value of it. It's going to be the hash code, or the hash code, which means it's going to never return true. Or it's not the hash code. It's, I think it is. It's confusing. We're going to go if it equals AI1. What we'll end up doing here later is actually transitioning to a friend or foe system, or it won't even be a friend or foe system. It'll be a colorizer of some kind. It'll be something that would be like, hey, this faction's colors are black and orange, and then all this stuff will render black and orange, and we'll just do some prefabs and stuff out, or we'll figure that out later because it's going to be dependent on the missions. So you'll have missions. Maybe you're fighting terrorists, or you're fighting police, or you're fighting guards, or you're fighting some thief faction or something. Each one is going to have a different texture style. So like the terrorist may be wearing more raggedy clothing if they're like low-level bad guys that are just trying to blow stuff up, or they may have full military uniforms if they're a high-level terrorist group like ISIS. If whatever we put in the game, we're going to put in there. And by the way, we probably will have terrorists in the game because the society that exists is super corrupted, which means a lot of people end up getting left in the dirt, and when you leave somebody in the dirt, they're eventually going to turn into a bad guy. And when we mean bad guy, we're meaning the enemy of the main power in the game. The reality of them, they're actually not bad guys. They're just people who don't like to be run over and have decided to resort to ugly tactics to win. What ends up making somebody a terrorist is people who just they're inflicting harm to cause terror. Um, Although the media uses the term a little too broadly, they literally call everybody terrorists. The reality, organizations like ISIS are actually military because of the way they operate, although they still do terror-based things, so I guess the terminology goes there. But that's a whole political discussion that I don't want to get into. We're going to work on this because code is code. Just trying to get some ideals fleshed out there while I'm thinking about them. Did it work this time? Yeah, here we go. We got a civilian. His name isn't showing up, though. Actually, it might be showing up. It just might be too small. No, his name's not showing up. Weird. I wonder why his name doesn't work. Here's another job offer. Yeah, that's that one that just called me. I actually want to see what that is. Just for the hilarity of it, because I get these so often, and they're all template driven. Yeah, they're looking for a senior software engineer. I'm not an engineer actually. I am a programmer though, and a developer and designer. I'm really good at. Technically, I would qualify as an engineer, but not at the senior level. Senior level engineers are people that know the architecture so well, and I know how to program in Java exceptionally well, but I don't know the architecture. So I couldn't tell you how Java optimizes code very well. I couldn't tell you how the memory model works perfectly. I got a rough idea, so we know this works. We know we got civilians now. We know we've got enemies. Let's go to the text. We go to the fixing the text. That's what we're gonna do next. So if we open it up real quick, look at what we got first before we move on. Oh yeah, this is working now. Wonder why these guys just not have names? No, they might not have names. No, it's none of the names are rendering over here. Actually, none of them are rendering at all now. Oh, oh. There's something wrong with my selection code now. You notice this? That everything thinks it's in a different spot now? Wow. That sucks that that broke. That was working. um, Bummer, I guess. As long as we're in the middle, it's working perfectly fine. Now, if I actually scroll here and I select this guy, he is selected, so it's the selection code's working. So if I hit move real quick and I move him, I can move him around. I deselect him, so that means the selection code's working. It's it's whatever's telling the text to render is not functioning properly. So if we go find this, because it's probably something dumb. Okay, yeah, it's right here. So here's our code to render selection. And we just tell it to render at txty, so we're at txty 0z. 0 rotation and 0.5 on the text size. We're going to do time scale on this real quick. Or zoom. That'll resize the text to match where we're at. It's probably not... No, because this is the same code we're using for render here. And we're using it here. This is where I think there's something wrong with my font render, because I've made a mark here saying like, hey, something's wrong with the background. It's not rendering in the proper spot. So right now, how we render the background exactly behind each tile for the character. So we render the background first, and then we render the tiles. By default, the background's on. You can turn it off. We render both in a batch style. So we bind, draw all of our stuff, then unbind. There actually is a batch object for doing this. I kind of need to make one. From what I'm told, it should render better. I'll have to test that because I honestly don't know if it actually does. Okay, and this has its own projection matrix. We will make a projection matrix down here. Or not a projection matrix, we can make a matrix that tells us how our stuff's set up. So we translate both these by the same value. So these should render in the same spot with each other. There's something we're missing though. And there's definitely something that isn't rendering properly. What we could do is, instead of doing it this way, we could just render mouse. Because we're going TX. TX is our mouse coordinate, is what that actually is. No, that's our center point. Oh no, it's center plus mouse X to floor. And then mouse X is... Let's just do this real quick. MX, YX, and we'll test this real quick before we go on to the font render, because I kind of want to make sure my code's not bugging out on me while we're testing. It should give me my location. So yeah, that should fix it. Because if I go over here, no, we're back to. You know why it's not working? We're translating by. We're getting the actual location in the world. That's what we're getting. I need to get the actual location on screen. So I need this, is what I need. Because we can render all the tiles by screen location, and they work perfectly fine because they've got a lot of code that makes sure they work fine. But anything else we try to render probably won't result in what we want. So we're going to have to tweak things. Okay, that's Bob right there. Still not working. I don't get it. So then we're getting some kind of behavior issue here. It's probably something like this. So we need to go math.floor. That's probably what the issue has been this whole time. So I'm sitting here writing code that's doing other things, trying to fix it in a completely different direction. And what it might simply just be is a rounding error. Okay, enemy 3. If we go all the way over here, still not working properly. Now if we go to the negative side, what do we get behavior over here? We get nothing. If we're shifted just by any amount from center, so if we go over 1, it only works if we're 1 tile over. So it's off by the factor of the location. And we know when we select it works. So how do we do our selection? How do we know what entity we click? So do left click. We go get world tile X and Y. So if we go up here, tile X and Y, where's tile X and Y past entities? It's txty. So if we go txty equals tile.x, tile.y, this should work. Maybe it's not working. Oh, yeah, you know what? These are the camera bounce. We're checking against camera bounce. This is only going to return the correct value for in the camera bounce. What we need to do is, instead of doing this, we need to go, if tx is equivalent to entity.xi real quick. This should return the value we're looking for. And then we'll leave this code right here because this actually looks pretty nice with it not always being in the same spot over the entity. It follows your mouse. So it means it updates with your cursor better. See, if we move around, it updates with your cursor, and it's so nice. Yeah, there we go, fixed it. So that was the issue. We were checking against the render coordinates rather than the position on the map. So what we wanted to do is we want to go, okay, if the current position of my cursor according to the map, so TX is our tile coordinate for our thing. We need to actually rename this. Rename code occurrences, and we want to go mouse map pos x, and we want to do the same thing down here to the y. This will remove confusion, so we know exactly what we're doing next time we come to do this. And then, yeah. And we would call this mouse screen pos x scaled. Because what we're doing is we're getting the mouse position. So how you get the mouse position according to the camera? Because MX is going to give me between negative 0.5 to 5 on the X plane. We then want to scale that up to the screen size. So if our screen is 20 wide, we then get negative 10 to 10. That tells us where we are on that screen. Then in order to get to the position of the map, we got to scale down by the tile size so we know what tile we're sitting over. And then we got to place by the camera. So the camera position, which is center X right here, which doesn't change, which actually I need to add something to this. So this has been bugging me for a while. I don't know if a single one of you guys have seen it. But the camera position is actually off by half in each direction. We're going to fix that real quick. It won't affect anything for our code because everything is centered. At least in theory it shouldn't. We'll see here in a second. We're going to rename this real quick as well so we know what these are. This is where I keep talking about naming your variables is important. I chose poorly to name these, probably because I was sleepy when I was writing this. Get the position of the mouse based on screen size and tile scale. Get the position of the mouse relative to the map. The tile the mouse is currently over. We're going to actually render what tile you're hovering over here eventually. Actually, we won't do the floor. We'll do walls. So you can say like wooden wall, stone barricade, iron door. That way, this will come into play later because you can shoot through walls. You'll be able to break down barriers. You'll be able to collapse walls. So there'll be destruction in the game. It'll be limited destruction. There'll be some things you can't break, some things you can, like concrete. Unless you're shooting with a nuke, you're not going to break it. But that'll come into play here later. But we rename those variables. We've done that. Our thing is working again. Let's load real quick to see if that screen centering fixed itself. Okay, so yeah, I think we actually went farther over. Yeah, I'm going to minus by 0.5 instead of plus by 0.5. Or plus zoom. So what this will be 0.5 by default. And we'll have to check to see if this works properly. That looks good. The A is... I can't tell if the A is in the right spot or not. I don't think anything is actually changed by that camera position. Now if we move over, yeah, all of our stuff's working right. If we zoom in, all of our stuff is still working right. Zoom out, all of our stuff is working right. All the text is impossible to read now. This is where I was talking about adding manual zoom levels because, as you can tell, if we zoom out too far, because we're just doing generated zoom levels that are just in existence, certain things aren't working properly. Like if I'm playing at this zoom level, I'm not going to be able to read that because it skewed the text. It's probably like I need to add anti-aliasing or something. Some kind of artifact correction is what needs to be added. Okay. Anyways, on to working on the fixing the font. So close everything but the font, and we're going to sit here and work on this. So now we in the previous video, I've already loaded in all the data about the font. What I need to do is come down here when we go to generate it. I then need to transition the mesh size. How we're going to do this is going to be tricky because I don't know precisely how this stuff works. I've got a general idea. So we're going to sit here and we're going to more or less toy with it. So So it's this variable right here is what I want to change. But how to change it is not apparent. But we need to figure out okay, we already have an index variable because we actually put stuff in here, so that'll work. So we want to go chart data. Actually, we want to cache the chart data somewhere up here. Okay, so char font data equals font data dot index. So we get our font data, and then we want to go int width equals the data doesn't equal null, because there is cases that will equal null because we won't have font data for everything. Although it does look like the data we do have should contain all characters, but just in case somebody deletes a line by mistake. We want to go data dot width, and if we're missing, we want to go default or font width default. And I need to check to see what this is sized as. We got to open up our CV data for this, or CSV data. Which, by the way, the cool thing is I found out there's a method you can call on Windows that you can get CSV data about all the process on your computer. That's going to come into play here later. I'm going to write an application to track what programs are running on your computer for freelancing. The ideal is I want to track how long I've had IntelliJ open, how long YouTube's been open, stuff like that, so I can properly charge clients out by hours. But let's see. That's actually completely unrelated though. We want to go resources, data. No, we don't want to go data. That's where our maps and stuff are going to be at. We want textures, and we want font, and here's our CV data. So I want to see what the default width comes out to, and it looks like it's going to be 0. So instead of setting it to 0, we actually want to set it to cell width. Yeah, that sounds about right. So you want to go cell width, because if it's going to be, actually we can do a double if here. So if default where it doesn't equal 0, font width default. If it does, we want to go cell width. This needs to be a question mark, so this needs to be. Essentially what we did is we put an inline if statement here. So we go if condition this, if not this, if condition this, not. So it's a nested if else. And what we want to do is we want to do width divided by cell width to get this properly, because I think that's what we need. And I actually didn't want to put this here, so I'm going to Control Z, because that's why. We're gonna touch height here later, because height is not as important, but we're gonna do right here. So that's there, and we want to do it here, and then we want to come down to where we're rendering things. So we want to grab this again, drag it down here, and we just want to go C on here. And how we do it, instead of calling size, we want to call width on this. And we're going to check out how this renders. Everything broke. That's what happened. Shoot. We're gonna have to do some math here. What we should be able to do, and I don't know if my math is going to be correct on this, we should be able to just do this. Okay. You know what, just copy this whole line because I think I screwed up this line, but these two should be the same. Okay. Still messed up. You know what, because I'm not quite sure if it's the width that's broken or something else. We need to change this back to size. Because size is probably not what I think the variable means. Okay, so we've got that set back. We need to go back to figuring out what's going on with this data. It's probably because this value is too high, is what this is. Because what we're doing is we're plussing by 1 and then dividing. Because we're getting our index, then we're dividing by the number of rows to get our kind of position in the world. Then we want to add by the number of pixels. So this doesn't need to be cell width, this needs to be sheet dot total width. Is what this actually needs to be. We'll try this. Still nothing. Okay. Let's follow our data here. So data.width. We need to see what these numbers look like. So we're gonna hit run debug. Debug's probably one of the most useful things as a developer you can use because you can physically see what you're doing. Okay, our data came back null. Let's open the console. We're not getting any errors. But why don't we have data? Okay, so we need to debug up here further because I need to. We never confirmed if our data loaded correctly. So we're gonna hit run debug. Okay, char base width. Okay, our number is 0. Okay, we parsed this. Oh, you know what? Because we have a 0 value. Okay, hit run, and then we're gonna hit run debug again. That's why the first one came out null. Okay, if we're null, we create a new value. We store its index. We then store the data. Then if we're base width, we then store the value. I want to see what I stored in data. Can you let me check that? Okay, we want to go this, and then we want to go font data, object 0, width is 7. Okay, so we don't need to debug this anymore. We know it's loading now. So if we come down here, our first value should no longer be null. It has a width of 7. The weird thing is, okay, so we went. Oh, it's because if data is equal null, then we want to go data dot width does not equal 0. Then we go data dot width. If not, we then want to do everything else because that guarantees us we'll never have a 0 point. Because the reason why everything's probably not working is because it was defaulting to 0 maybe. Okay, so we got our first row is 0. Our second value should be, yeah, that's correct. And these should both be 0. Okay, here's our first value. We want to see what it is. It came out as 0 because we're not doing this. That's exactly why it's breaking. If you divide an int by an int, you get an int. And because you can't have a partial int, it's not going to work. Okay, so we're going to hit close here. We're going to fix whatever error just popped up. It says there's an error in my class file, but my eyes aren't seeing it. Okay, it's right here. What are you missing? Okay, question, if this is why I don't like nesting things. Data doesn't equal null. Okay, so if data doesn't equal null, then we call data.width. Doesn't equal 0, then it's data, or data is greater than equal to 0 would be actually a better way to do this, because we don't want negative widths either. Both cases here. Then we go data, then we go if. Data if, we're missing an if statement. This should be our last if. But why is it not our last if? Actually, put an and statement here, and this should fix it. Okay, there we go. Then we want to one-line this again. This is why I don't normally like using these, is because they're really hard to read. Minecraft excessively uses these, and I get infuriated by it sometimes, because I'll be going through there and they'll have like a 15-line if like this. And it's like, really, if you're going to have that many, just do a conditional statement of some kind that would be, or multiple conditional statements, because it looks so much easier to read. We're going to do this again and see if it loads up properly. Yes, it's skewed as hell, but it looks right. So all our numbers are actually next to each other. Okay, you know what we didn't do? That's our texture coordinate. We need our mesh now. So we want to go times width divided by cell width. And we need to make sure this is by a float, or it's going to get that same problem we had earlier. This should make sure that these aren't skewed looking. Yeah, they don't look skewed. They're in the same position they were previously, so now the next thing we need to do is come down here and restore our value here. So it needs to be size times this value here times scale. And oh shoot, that's not what I wanted. Well, actually, I do need that there. There's no easy way out of this. So we're going to have to do this repeatedly, because, yeah, there's not an easy way out of this. Oh yeah, we're already getting the data on here, so we just need to grab this. And the reason why I'm doing this separately, where I've got two variables here, is because binding and unbinding take more time than I think rendering takes. So we don't want to be binding, unbinding, binding, unbinding between these two. We just want to bind, render everything, unbind. Bind, render everything, unbind. That did not work. It's closer though. Okay, so we got to figure out what we messed up. Oh yeah, because this variable is not correct. You know what? We need to get her. We need to get method, get method, get method, get method. So we're gonna go copy our one that works. So we want this. Then down here at the bottom, we want to go public and get width, and then we want byte char. or byte C actually is what we're going to do. So we want to go, and this will be C. We want to go if C is greater than equal than 0 and C is less than font data.length. This will prevent crashes. And then by default we return cell width. And then while we're here, we're just going to go ahead and fix our really crappy looking if statements so they're easier to read. Because I got an intern who's probably going to start working on this code here pretty soon, so I can start training him to actually be a game developer. He does have some experience with game development, but not a lot with Java. But I do want to actually train him, because if I ever make a company, I need people who are actually good at what they do, and I don't want to be hiring people that are professionals because expensive. But I do want to hire people that are actually talented. Anyways, we can go ahead and do this, and that's what our if statement looks like. Look how much cleaner that looks to read. If you can avoid using multi-lines, avoid using multi-lines. Public int get size x is what this will be, and we'll call byte C. And we want to copy this right here. Okay. And this will be a float. And we'll make another one. Get float, get size x scaled. So byte C, and then we'll return get size x c times size. So we have a size factor. By default it's 1, but most of our stuff renders with size 0.5. That's where the scale factor comes in. This actually will change our mesh sizes, because when it calls render down here, it actually physically changes the mesh. We don't have to change it up there because we're going to default our meshes, but we can call get size here, and this will replace this entire line here. And we just got to pass in C. And we can get rid of all of this. And we can do the same thing up here. And this will replace all of our code here. And we just need to make sure we're going to grab the right char. Because this is probably why this code up here might be not as working as efficiently, is that we weren't grabbing the actual char, we're grabbing the index. Not the way you want to do that. But then we can call this at the top. Do we want to? No, the UVs need to call get with. I think. Yeah. Because then we just go like here, and then we do index. Yeah, that'll work, because we're grabbing the width. What we can also do is float with scaled equals width. So we can copy this whole line here, and that way we're only calculating it once. It'll save almost no time really, because it's irrelevant. Java is really intelligent, that even if you write inefficient code, if you write it in a certain way, it'll optimize your code in runtime for you. That way, if I was calling with scaled code twice, so if I was calculating this twice, it would go, hey, you're calculating this in the same place twice. Let's go ahead and like pre-cache this for you and calculate it once. It's pretty good about doing that. It doesn't do this compile time, although I kind of wish it would do a compile time, because then it would be slightly more efficient, but it works. That's the reason why Java can keep up with languages like C++ now, is because it has runtime optimization. In some cases, it actually ends up running faster than C++, because that runtime optimization can remove so much code out of your workspace. But let's check this out and see how we're looking at it now. Oh, we crashed. Wow. We must have buffer overflowed. Is there an unsigned byte? There's not an unsigned byte. Ah. Back to using it. That's weird. I basically need an unsigned byte is what I need, because I need something that goes to 255. But I think Java seems you're using a signed byte, which signed bytes go from negative 128 to 127 is what they go to. With 0 being that extra missing 128 value. Because any signed value, 0 counts as part of that 255. Except 0 would be 129, I believe. And then 1 would be 130. And it just goes up like that. I used to be able to do the math for it because I had to take, I don't know how many courses that teach you unsigned. And you almost never use them anymore. You don't need to know like how unsigns work at the base level, because very few people will end up programming the base level logic. We have a jumbling mess of blarg. Okay. So we know our scaling code's working. We know everything else is working. It's our position logic that has screwed itself up. So we get our width. We should just be able to times this by scale and then times by I. So if our position was 10 and we were rendering at half scale, it would just render at 5. But it doesn't seem to want to do that. Okay. So I'm going to cache these values real quick so we can go into debug mode and I can actually watch what these do. So we run hit debug, and we've hit past our hour point. We're getting close though. There's only a couple more changes and this will probably work. Okay, so we're rendering character 70, which I have no clue what is. Our width is incredibly small. Because we fucked this up. Okay, so we're going to close this because I know it's wrong. I just need to make sure that I probably need to make a new method. So up here when we're calculating this, we're calling getWidth, and then we're scaling by default. Okay, so this method is only used by the render code. So this needs to actually be cell width is what this needs to be, because we're trying to figure out what is our actual size compared to cell width, because all the code is based on cell width size. So we need to figure out where we're at. If we run, it's probably going to work now. Yeah, we're closer. Things are still squashed. Some letters are doing correctly, some are not. Like these are really close. The P and the S are on the opposite side of the U. Cast this by a float too. It's Probably not going to change anything. We're going to go in debug mode again, and we want to just see what all these values are. Okay, so we got our float value is now 0.2. That's closer. We then end up with an x position of -1. Because we got a width of that, our scale is 0.5, and our I. So yeah, then -0.1 would be our first character. Our next one is 80. Yeah, that's to the right. Okay, so this is all looking good. But if we open this up, the N, okay, so the E is not rendering in the correct position on that. Ah, I know exactly what's up. Okay, so what we're doing, when we do the math, we're timesing by I, we're timesing by our index to figure out where our position is. We can't do this because now all of our characters are no longer the same size. So what we actually need to do is we make a variable called floatxfx. This would literally just start at the coordinate x. Then we would render, we would go xf plus equal our width times our scale. And then we might add a spacer to this, and we just put it in here. And if we run this, it should actually fix. Yeah, there we go. Well, I said that prematurely. Some of our characters are rendering properly now. Some of them are not. Because action none, stuff is squished. So we need a spacer. We're going to go plus 0.1 times scale. Maybe times 2. And then you get the position between the I and the O, it's too high. And then you get the position between the N and that, it's too low. Okay, I need to look at something here real quick. So tools, CBG. Okay, everything starts on the 0 line. Then we go over to get our width. Okay. So we need to add a spacer before and after. So our width actually needs to be like this. Point F. So we want to go like this. So we're going to go, hey, I'm actually wider than I really am. That way we trick our width into rendering a little better. Entity looks pretty good. I, for some reason, is taking more space than it needs to take. I want to open that tool again. I probably shouldn't have closed the folder. I need to look at how much space I gets. I might have more space than it needs. So we need to go 512 to get the lowercase characters. I is right there. It does look like it has a couple pixels on both sides, so these characters look like they come pre-built with space. So what is wrong with this code then? So I'm going to remove the spacer, and we're going to try again. Okay. Still got too much space on the between the I and the O for some reason. And then the colon is rendering in the middle of the N. Plus our position is completely messed up now. Except if you look at our example in the middle, our A is perfectly where it's supposed to be. These guys are not where they're supposed to be. Except for these up here. These are both almost 0, 0, which tells me could be the render code's not right for the... We're going to remove X out of here. We're going to go like this. I want to remove X out of the scale equation, so we're not moving it around. That's probably why we're seeing stuff in a completely different spot. Is the scale code messed? Yeah, that's what was wrong with it. I still got a couple issues here. So none is rendering perfectly fine. So it's not the O that has the extra space on it. But these guys are squished. So A, C, T, and I are really smashed on top of each other. And I can't tell if that's a UV issue or something else. It's almost impossible to figure out if you have a UV issue or not. I'm trying to think of like a way to tell this. I might have to do it the hard way real quick. So tabletop game, resources, textures, fonts. Okay, here's our font. We're going to duplicate it real quick. We're going to leave that as a copy, and we're going to modify this one. So we're going to hit, you know, we're going to hit edit real quick. Oh no, we can't do it that way. Shoot. We're going to have to open with a GIMP. Open with GIMP. I need to make a GIMP file for the same way so I can touch up a couple of the characters to make them render a little better. So we're going to hit File, Save. We'll save right there. Okay. So what I can do is I need to change my grid. I'm trying to, oh yeah, configure grid. And we want to set our grid to 32 by 32 because that's our pixel size for our characters. Yeah, they all look like they're in about the roughly correct position. We want to make a new background real quick. So edit layer. We'll call this back. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. So edit layer. This is font. And then we want new layer. We'll call this back. Back is here. And then we're going to do this. Okay. File, save. One that makes it easier to read these real quick. Let's do a different color background. Red. Because I can't see my crosshairs. So we have these little crosshair characters. Okay. I'm trying to think of a really easy way to do this. I can't think of an easy way to do it. Okay, so we have that selected. What we're going to do is just do this. We're not going to do this on all the characters because I just need to test a couple. But we're going to, yeah, we'll test A. So we're going to hit save, and we're going to hit export as. And this will let us see where our meshes and UVs are located. The textures are going to automatically scale to the meshes. So no matter what we do with the mesh size, you know what, we might have screwed up our mesh sizes. Where's our meshes calculated? So I'm going to go here real quick. So with scale. Okay. So we're going to hit run again, and we're going to be able to sit here and watch where exactly these are rendering at, because they'll scale to the exact mesh sizes. And what the did we do now? Okay, we messed something up. Okay, actually we need to call get size x, and then we want to pass in index. And of course we're going to cast this to byte. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So we can actually physically see where things are, and we've got overlap. So if I open this up, and if I hit Windows plus, okay, we can physically look at these, and if the cursor was not in the way, this would be so much easier. Yeah, we can see it is position logic. You see how the meshes actually are pretty much where they should be. I can go like this. Yeah, there's overlap between the meshes. So the mesh's position is not perfect. And you know what we need to do? I need X, and I need to get rid of this window here. By the way, the reason I know this hotkey is if I make GUIs for client, I will literally zoom in and like look at the pixels. I've had a couple clients that have been really picky about pixels. And I'm like, you know what? My eyesight kind of sucks, and somehow you can see this and I can't. Let's see. We do need to fix this too, but that's going to take some more UV toy with, because the actual characters are only 20 pixels tall, though the texture is 32. But I do not think I have to see if they're centered. I have to figure out what's up with the texture coordinate data. But this is good. So this all works. We're going to actually come in here real quick again. Oh, come on, Taz. No, not right now. I don't want to move my texture. I want to move my selection box. Taz, I'll let you on a second. Okay, so I'm going to just keep moving this. Hold on. I'm going to cut this video here and I'll do all the editing and stuff. I'm going to go take my dog for a walk. So, be back.